Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we begin. We'll start in a few minutes, inshallah. I think people are still praying Maghrib, so. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair and welcome back to our story time, inshallah, lesson from the best generation, storied past. So today we are going to do a new experiment. And so before we get started with this experiment, this is very, very important for you to have your parents with you when you're doing this, because it can get a little bit messy and you'll see why exactly, and it can actually be harmful. So what we're going to do is that we're going to take this balloon here and blow it up. Okay. After we blow it up, we tie it up. And now it's just a simple regular balloon, right? And what happens when we put a pin in it? Well, it's going to pop, inshallah. So just be careful. Remember, this is why you need to have parents with you when you do this, so that it doesn't pop in your face and you get hurt. All right, bismillah. See, it popped when you put that pin in there. Now, watch what's going to happen with this balloon. All right, we tie this one up. And now for this balloon, what we're going to do is that we're going to put a barrier on this balloon, okay? This barrier is going to be a little bit of scotch tape. Take a little bit of scotch tape and we put it anywhere on the balloon, okay? And we stick it on the balloon like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a pin and bismillah, see what happens. See how that pin is inside the balloon and nothing is happening. Another pin. Well, it's not supposed to happen, but let's try it. Let's try it again. I have a balloon. I have a backup balloon. I got to do it a little bit quickly, I guess, I'm told. All right, let's try it again. Put a piece of tape on the balloon. Okay. Take a pin and bismillah. See how the pin goes inside and doesn't pop, right? So remember that. Now we put a barrier on that balloon, and because of that barrier, when you put the pin in, it did not pop. And I'll talk about that, inshallah, as we get in the middle of our talk or towards the end of our talk, why that's important, how that's relevant to our talk today. So as you are aware, today's talk is going to be about the chief of muezzins. And we'll talk about who that is, inshallah, if you already did not know. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa amma ba'd. Fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Radiyallahu anhum wa radu'an. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله لا ينظر إلى صوركم وأموالكم ولا ينظر إلى قلوبكم وأعمالكم. So today's story is about Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anh, or also known as Bilal al-Habashi, because his family was from Abyssinia. We've all heard of Bilal radiallahu anh, and we've heard different stories about him, and maybe some of these stories will be redundant to all of us. But again, I think there's a lot of important lessons, and it's always good to talk about the Sahaba, because the more you talk about people and what they did, the more in love you are with them. And again, the purpose of this story series is that we fall in love with the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, and inshallah, according to the hadith we talked about, that we will be with the ones we love. So these are the best of the best. So the only thing that's going to happen is that it's going to revive our memory about the stories and also increase our iman, inshallah, and our love for them. So the background of Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anh was that his father, his name was Rabah, and his mother's name was Hamama. Both their parents were just regular people, but during the year of the elephant, if you know what that year of the elephant is, that's when Abraha came to try to destroy the Kaaba, and that's also the year that the Prophet ﷺ was born. So the year of the elephant, they were both taken as slaves, and that was a culture back then that, people just took other people as slaves. And so Bilal was born into slavery. He was not a slave before, but his parents were made into slaves, and then he was born as a slave. The description of Bilal is that he was very handsome, he was very muscular, he was very dark, he had hazel eyes, They said that if you looked at his eyes, you would not want to turn away. And he was very strong and he was very intelligent. And he was considered one of the best in the class because of all these different qualities. And when you're the best of the best, you're given as slaves to the best of the best, to the nobility, to the rich people. So his owner was Umayyah bin Khalaf. And Umayyah bin Khalaf was one of the most staunchest enemies of Islam and the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ. One day, Umayyah and other people were talking about the Prophet ﷺ, about what he's teaching. And Bilal ibn Rabah overhears some conversation. And he hears that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is calling to oneness, to one Allah. And Bilal radiallahu anh, automatically, because it's inside our nature to always, we're born on the fitrah of Islam, meaning that we always gravitate towards that. So when he heard this message, to him, it sounded like, oh, this sounds right. So he became a Muslim. And when his master Ubay bin Khalaf found out, he would torture him. He would do so many bad things to him. He would tie him up in the house. He would starve him. He would spit in his face. He would force the idols into his face and say, worship Lat and Uzza, or say you believe in Lat and Uzza. And he would even call him Ibn Sauda, which basically he would say, Ya Ibn Sauda, basically, oh son of a black woman. And that was very humiliating for him because it was done to humiliate him. His father was actually Arab, but he was always referred to, his mother was, Abyssinian also. So they would call him, you son of a black woman, which was very derogatory. And again, they were racist back then too. He would also tie Bilal radiallahu anh and drag him to the desert. And of course, the famous punishment that we're all aware of, that he would take Bilal radiallahu anh, he would lay him on his back, and he would put the rock on his chest, so that he would lay on the burning sand. And again, this sand is, imagine in the summer when your driveway, if you have asphalt driveway, and when it's really hot, 100 degrees, and in Saudi it gets much hotter than that. When it's 100 degrees, try to step outside on your driveway with bare feet. I will guarantee you will not be able to walk even 1 foot there. You'll be jumping on your feet and run back inside. But he was made to lay on the ground with a rock on his chest so that he couldn't move. They wanted him to disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They wanted him to say, I believe in Lat and Uzza. And maybe he could have hit his iman. Imagine if that was done to us. If all we had to say was, hey, I believe in Lat and Uzza, that's it. We would make excuse that, iman's in my heart. I'm just saying this out front. He could have done the same exact thing. But what did he do? He didn't just say, I disbelieve in Lat and Uzza. He didn't say that. He bore the torture and he said 2 words. He would say, Ahad, Ahad. So Umar radiallahu anh, after he became Muslim later on in Medina, he would ask Bilal radiallahu anh, why did you use the word or choose the words Ahad and Ahad? There's so many different ways to proclaim your Islam, saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, say, I believe in Allah. Why do you choose the word Ahad? And he said that, the reason why they don't like us, or they don't want to be Muslim, or they don't want to believe in Islam, is because we say that all these idols are nothing and there's only one Allah. And that's what bothered them the most. So he said, I wanted to say something that would get back at them, and I knew that word would bother them the most. So I would say Ahad and Ahad. So subhanAllah, look at how strong his iman was, that he was ready to die for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was actually going through torture, knowing that saying these words is infuriating his enemy even more. So one day, as this is going on, as these tortures are happening, the Prophet ﷺ walks by with the Sahaba, and he looks at the state of Bilal radiallahu anh, he looks at the Sahaba and says, is there anyone that can buy Bilal? And you know who pops up? Who do you think? Yep, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. He quickly gets up and he goes to Umayyah bin Khalaf and says, how much do you want for Bilal? And Umayyah bin Khalaf goes, yeah, I'll sell him to you. You're the one that corrupted his mind in the first place. He heard all these things about Allah and the Rasul from you. Yeah, I'll sell him to you. So he goes, I will sell him to you for 10 dinar. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu anh runs home, grabs a bag of coins. 10 dinar, you can imagine, it's like gold coins. It was a lot of money back then. Gold coins are really expensive. So he runs home, he grabs a bag of coins and comes and gives it to Umayyah bin Khalaf. And Umayyah bin Khalaf starts laughing. He says, 10 dinars. If you had just negotiated with me and haggled me, we don't do haggling here, but people back home, they know. If you just haggled with me, I would have sold them to you for 1 dinar. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he turns around to me and says, Wallahi, if you had told me you wanted 100 dinar for him, I would have given it to you. So subhanAllah, if you look just from that, it was a message to the Muslims, to the non-Muslims, to the slaves, that your iman, we're not going to haggle. We're not going to try to shortchange your iman. You are very valuable to us. Even if they were asking 100 dinars, we would have paid for it. right? And that sent a very strong message, especially to the people that were converting to Islam, because initially it was the poor people. It was the people that were slaves, that had no money, that were converting to Islam. And when you think of that, you say, oh, these people really are nothing. We want the more rich people. No, but Islam came, and we'll talk about this. Islam came to destroy all those stereotypes. So after that, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would actually call Bilal radiallahu anhu Sayyiduna, meaning my master. So that was a story about how Bilal radiallahu anhu was free. Now, some other notable things about Bilal radiallahu anhu was that he was the muazzin of Masjid Nabawi. And because of that position, he was very close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, we know that we pray 5 times a day, so he had to give azan 5 times a day. And the culture or the habit was that he would ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can I make the azan? So he would meet with him at least 5 times a day, and because of that, they became very, very close. Right? Their connection was very strong. So when Makkah was conquered again by the Muslims, when they went and took over Makkah again, with all the Sahabas around, the Prophet ﷺ looks around and he goes, where's Bilal? So he calls Bilal and he said, Bilal, climb the Kaaba and give the azan. Right? And this is the status that Islam gave to people who were Muslim. Right? He used to be a slave, right? The lowest of the low class. Nobody even looked at a slave. But because of saying the kalima, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised the status so high that he, from laying on the burning ground with a rock on his chest, now he's on top of the Kaaba where most people dream they can be. And he's giving the azan. And he's doing this in front of who? In front of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, in front of Umar radiallahu anhu, in front of Uthman radiallahu anhu, in front of Ali radiallahu anhu, these big giants you can say in the deen. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Bilal radiallahu anhu to go up there and give the azan. Can you imagine what that looks like? And people back in that time too are racist. So what happened was, while this was going on, one of the kuffar were looking at this thing on the planet, and you're making this black guy get up there and give the azan. Again, Islam came, and it was not for rich people. It was not for businessmen. It was not for men. It was not for women. It was not for black or white. And this the hadith that I mentioned in the beginning, where I said the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah la yanzuru ila suwarikum wa amwalikum, walakin yanzuru ila qulubikum wa a'malikum." That indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at someone's face or their wealth, but He looks at their heart and their deeds. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at someone's face or their money, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at their deeds, and He looks at their hearts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored him this way in the deen. He could have left him as a slave and he would have died as a slave and wouldn't have gotten anything out of it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him iman. And not only that, because of the torture, because of the suffering and the sacrifice that he made, why? For us. Imagine if he just gave up his Islam at that time. Imagine if all the Sahaba that were going through a difficult time were like us and say, you know what, I can't take this anymore. You know what, I'm going to just say I'm not a Muslim. Right? Na'udhu billah. But Allah says, radiyallahu anhum wa radu an, we are pleased with them and they are pleased with us. Right? So this was how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored him. In fact, to highlight how important it is to get this racism out of our heart, one time Abu Dharr called Bilal radiallahu anhu. He referred to him as Ya ibn Sauda. You know, remember the same term that Umayy bin Khalaf would call him to humiliate him. So Bilal radiallahu anhu went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he told him, "O Messenger of Allah, Abu Dharr called me this." So there's a lot of lessons and we'll get to this. So listen to the story. So Prophet ﷺ called Abu Dharr. He said, "Abu Dharr, did you say this to him?" And Abu Dharr said, "Yes, I did say to him." And so the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, "You still have the traits of Jahiliyyah in you. And whoever has the traits of Jahiliyyah in them will dwell in the fire of hell." The Sahaba heard this and they were like, even if he prays and fasts, and the Prophet ﷺ said, even if he prays and fasts. This is what Islam came to change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the religion of deen, and He sent the Prophet ﷺ to eliminate any of this racism, that I'm better than you, you are better than me, because I'm from here, because I have this much money, I'm better than you. They came to destroy that, and the Sahaba were taught this lesson, right? So the lessons in this narration itself are so many that no matter how high your status is, right? Just because you're some famous person, or that you're an imam, or you're an alim, that because you're someone like that, that doesn't mean you don't have any feelings. Bilal radiallahu anhu imams were super strong. He could lay on the ground and lay on the heat. But when someone said this to him, it hurt him. Right? So we should always be very careful in the words we pull. And they may act like it doesn't hurt them. It's like, oh, that doesn't bother me. But I can tell you deep down inside, they have that in their heart. right? And again, we talked about how we should clear our hearts. To present a clear heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should always be very careful. So he was hurt, and what did he do? He went and complained to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam could say, Bilal said that this is Bilal. I'm going to believe whatever he says. But no, he was teaching us a lesson. What did he do? He verified. He called Abu Dhar radiallahu anh, and he said, Abu Dhar, did you say this? And this is a very important lesson for us nowadays, right? Especially in this time when we're all sitting in our homes, we're on our phones, we're watching news, we're getting these forwards on WhatsApp. All we're doing is forwarding without even thinking about it, right? Without verifying whether it's true or not. Without, someone tells us a rumor, we spread that rumor because it's exciting, it's gossip, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and again, this is Bilal radiallahu anh. He could say, yeah, of course, he's Bilal. He's a Badri Sahabi. I'm going to believe what he said. No, he called and he verified from Abu Dhar. Did you say that? And Abu Dhar radiallahu anh, what did he say? He didn't say, oh, what happened was, or like, you know what? No, I didn't mean it that way. I was trying to say. He said, no, oh Messenger of Allah, yes, I said it. He accepted the fact that he made this mistake and he said these words. And then when the Prophet ﷺ corrected him and he taught him and he refined him, he didn't say anything, right? And this is what the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was sent for the entire ummah, not just for the Sahaba. He was sent to refine us, to polish us, to correct us, so that when we go meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can present Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala our clean and pure hearts. If people all around us are always saying, good job, you did good job, and nobody ever corrects us, how will we know what we're doing wrong? How will we know what to fix in our life? How do we know that we're not doing something wrong, right? And the last place we want to do that is on the Day of Judgment when we're raised and we find out, oh, all these things I was doing wrong I should have been corrected. But again, that's a whole different lecture, because you can't just get up and start correcting everyone that you meet. You have to first, there's a proper way of doing it. But again, this just lessons in that narration. So now, the last part of the story about Bilal radiallahu anh, and this one is going to be really emotional. So, and again, it's okay to cry. It's okay to shed tears when you hear these stories, because you want to connect with what's going on. You want to feel the pain that the Sahaba felt, and you want to feel how they felt around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So during the last days of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was ill. Before he passed away, he was very ill. And Bilal radiallahu anh would come in and, obviously to seek permission to give the azan. He would look at the state of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how sick he looked. And he would say, wa huzna, basically means the grief that I'm feeling, it was hurting him to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in so much pain and so much suffering. And he would say, I wish my mother never gave me birth, because I wouldn't have to see this day then. Right? That's how much they loved the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they couldn't bear to see him go through such difficulty. Right? And he didn't want us to have that pain at all. When the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the prayer that came after he passed away, Bilal radiallahu anh had to give the adhan for it, obviously. When he had to say, when he got to Ashhadu Anna, say the next part, because he was so used to seeing the Prophet ﷺ in front of him that he started choking up, and he couldn't do it. For 3 straight days, he tried to give the azan and he could not give the azan. And everywhere he saw, everywhere he looked, he remembered the Prophet ﷺ, the memories that he had with him, the advice that he gave him, where he sat, where he met him, his smile, it was too much for him. And so he finally went up to Abu Bakr and said, oh, Abu Bakr, I've heard the merit and the fadail of doing jihad or going in the path of Allah. Please send me on a journey, on an expedition to jihad. And Abu Bakr said, oh no, O Bilal, you stay next to me. And Bilal says to Abu Bakr, he says, oh Abu Bakr, if you freed me for yourself, keep me. But if you freed me for the sake of Allah, let me go. One night, Bilal saw the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his dream, and the Messenger said to him, oh Bilal, why is it that you don't come to see us? Immediately the next day, he packed up his bags and he went towards Medina to see to visit the Prophet ﷺ. Obviously, we know that the Prophet ﷺ, even though he's passed away, he's alive in his grave. That's what our belief is. So he quickly went on his way and to a hurried place. And when he got there, he lay on the grave of his Habib, and he was just so sad. And Hassan and Hussein came out and they said, "Can you please give the azan?" And so he couldn't say no, because this was a grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ, and he loved the Prophet so much that he couldn't say no to them. So he gave the azan in Medina one more time. And when he started giving the azan, narrations say that Medina erupted. They just went crazy, because for them now, hearing Bilal give the azan, for them it's like, is the Prophet ﷺ back? They came out of their houses rushing, hoping and wishing that what what happened was all just fake, and that the Prophet ﷺ was alive, and that Bilal radiallahu anhu's back and he's giving the azan, but it wasn't like that. And so of course that was very difficult for them, and also for Bilal radiallahu anhu, that he couldn't stay in Medina anymore. He's tried to stick around, but he just couldn't do it. The same thoughts kept coming back in his mind, and he left. So later on, when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, the patriarch, or someone that holds a key, usually when someone has control of a city, they have these keys. So the person that was holding the keys of Jerusalem said, I will not give these keys except to Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. So Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, he took a group of Sahaba and he went there. And along with them were, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, Sharahbil bin Hasana. If you remember, he was a Sahabi in the story of Mu'adh bin Jabal, where he said that the plague is a mercy, it's not a punishment. He was a Sahabi. He was there. Khalid bin Walid was there. Mu'adh bin Jabal was there, radiallahu anhum. And so they all went up to Umar radiallahu anhu, and they said, Ya Umar, please tell Bilal radiallahu anhu to give the adhan. So of course Umar radiallahu anhu asked Bilal radiallahu anhu to give the adhan, and narrations say that when Bilal radiallahu anhu reached that point again where he said, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, the Sahaba, all of them who used to have black beards when they were younger, when they first accepted Islam, now they were all white, and their entire beard was drenched in tears, because they were thinking back to the time when the Prophet ﷺ was around, when they would have the same exact moment of adhan and the Prophet ﷺ being there, and so much so that they had to console Umar radiallahu anhu, because he was really, really it reminded of the Prophet so much that he just was unbearable. So this was a story. This was an amazing virtue of Bilal radiallahu anhu, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted him with the opportunity to give adhan in Masjid Nabawi, in on top of the Kaaba, and in Jerusalem, the three most holy places in their deen for us. So while he was passing away in Sham, his wife actually said the same thing Bilal radiallahu anhu was saying when the Prophet was passing away. She would say, Wa huzna, and Bilal radiallahu anhu corrected her, saying, La, don't say that, say Wa farha. So don't say what grief it is, say what happiness it is, because غَدًا سَأَلْتَقِي مُحَمَّدُ وَأَصْحَابِهِ. So tomorrow I will meet Muhammad, Prophet ﷺ, my beloved, and my companions. So that was his state, that when he was passing away, he couldn't wait. He wanted to leave everything behind and be with the Prophet ﷺ. Al-mar'u ma'a man ahab. He wanted to be with the ones he loved, and that just shows you what kind of person that he was. Most of us, we have this dunya, we have everything here, we have our families, our houses, our cars, our toys. We don't want to leave this place because we don't know where we're going to. But the Sahaba were so strong in their iman, they knew that they knew they wanted to go. That's why the hadith that's ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir basically means that ad-dunya is a prison for the believers and it's a jannah for the kafir, for the disbelievers. And one of the explanations that the scholars give is that the reason why it's a prison for the believers is because we're not able to see the Prophet ﷺ. We're not able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until the chains, until the prison, we're free from this prison, we go to our grave. That's when we can see, inshallah, the Prophet ﷺ, and inshallah we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why the hadith explanation, one of the explanations of the hadith, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir, is that way. So that was the life of Bilal radiallahu anhu. So just to recap some of the lessons, some of the things we learned along the way was that he was a slave that accepted Islam. And he was tortured tremendously by Umayyah bin Khalaf, who then was bought out by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who bought Bilal radiallahu anhu, and he freed him. And subsequently became the muazzin of Masjid Nabawi, the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. He also gave adhan in the Kaaba, on top of the Kaaba I should say, and also in Jerusalem, the three most holy sites. So there's a lot of lessons we talked about during this talk, but the main lesson that I want to leave you with is that the hadith that we initially talked about, Inna Allah la yanduru ala suwarikum wa amwalikum wa la yanduru ila, at what's in our heart and our good deeds, right? And that should tell us that it doesn't matter who we are, whether we're Indian, we're Pakistani, we're Palestinian, we're American. It doesn't matter if we're rich, if we're poor, if we're black, if we're white. Islam came as a religion to destroy all of that, to put us all on the same on the same surface, so that we can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gain as many good deeds. And whoever on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to look at this person and say he was rich and he's going to go to Jannah first, or he's poor, he's going to go to Jannah first. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala look at the deeds and how pure our hearts are, and that's how we'll go to Jannah. So we all are equal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that we have the ability to do good as much as possible. Right? And the only judgment again is that whoever did the most amount of good deeds. So we should never ever look down on anyone. We should never look at anyone else. And that's why when you look, and we're weak and it can be popped very easily. But when you have a layer, that tape, which was, we call that iman, you can use that as iman, that gives us strength. We don't fold right away. And Bilal radiallahu anh, because of that iman, he could lay on the burning sand and his body can go through whatever, but his iman was strong. Because he had that iman, that tape, the layers and layers and layers of iman. That's why if you look at all the stories, different stories of how the Sahaba were killed, right? They never gave up their iman. They always said Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah until the end, because they had that iman. And again, that's something we can achieve. No, we may not be able to get to the level of the Sahaba, but we can also do good deeds and elevate our status. And we never know who amongst us can be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why, back to the point, that we should never look down on anyone. Just because he was black, people used to look down on him. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had such high level for him because of his iman, how strong that iman was. No whip could break him. No rock could break him. No burning sand could break him, because his iman was so strong. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the iman of Bilal radiallahu anh. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put his love in our heart and put the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our heart. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to unite with Bilal radiallahu anh Jannah, so that we can also hear the azan from his blessed mouth and feel what the Prophet ﷺ used to feel and what the Sahaba used to feel. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from any racism in our heart, and so that any trace of jahiliyyah, so that we're not also from Jahannam. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive all our sins for anything we may have done in the past. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.